Enterprise network security relied on a simple architectural concept: the perimeter. We built hardened firewalls acting as an impenetrable outer shell, protecting the cluster of internal data nodes from the chaotic public internet. That model relied on all enterprise assets physically sitting inside that shell. Today, the adoption of cloud infrastructure, distributed remote workforces, and mobile endpoints means the enterprise footprint exists almost entirely outside those original walls. This illustrates the structural flaw of relying on an outer boundary. Once a threat bypasses the initial gateway, the network treats it as trusted. Facing zero internal resistance, the infection path jumps from low security endpoints directly into critical data servers. The resulting realization is that an asset's physical or network location inside an enterprise perimeter no longer guarantees its safety. The integration of unmanaged, personally owned devices into daily workflows further dissolves the concept of a definable, defendable network edge. The boundary is gone. Continuing to rely on a hardened outer perimeter while ignoring internal asset verification creates an architectural blind spot. In a flat network, the path from a single compromised endpoint to the enterprise's most sensitive data is often unobstructed. To address this structural failure, the National Institute of Standards and Technology published Special Publication 800-207. It establishes the definitive architectural response: zero trust. The core axiom of this framework is that the internal enterprise network must be treated as equally compromised and hostile as the public internet. To operate securely in this hostile environment, defensive focus shifts away from protecting broad network segments. It concentrates instead on securing individual data resources and compute services. Under this model, trust is never granted implicitly simply because a device is owned by the enterprise. In traditional single sign-on setups, an initial authentication grants broad, persistent access to a wide array of internal systems for an extended period of time. Zero trust requires continuous, per-session authentication. Every single unique request to access a resource must be independently verified. Furthermore, all communications must be secured and encrypted, treating internal traffic exactly the same as external traffic crossing the open internet. By eliminating implied trust zones, This architecture forces continuous cryptographic proof of authorization for all network activity, regardless of its origin. To understand why perimeter security fails, we must examine the concept of the implicit trust zone. This is an area within a network where all entities share a base level of unverified access. The NIST publication illustrates this using an airport terminal. A single passenger security checkpoint acts as a bottleneck. Once a passenger clears it, they are implicitly trusted, freely moving across the terminal. If a bad actor bypasses this gateway, they access multiple gates completely unchecked. Zero Trust resolves this by aggressively shrinking the implicit trust zone. The open concourse is eliminated. Each individual gate receives its own dedicated security checkpoint, meaning the trust zone encompasses strictly this single requested resource. This micro-isolation explicitly prevents unauthorized lateral movement between resources. Accessing one data server grants zero permissions to access the server sitting right next to it. Minimizing the implicit trust zone ensures that if an attacker compromises a single endpoint, the damage is contained. The breach remains an isolated, manageable event, rather than a systemic network failure. Enforcing this minimal trust zone requires a specific dual-component mechanism. The policy decision point, or PDP, and the policy enforcement point, or PEP. Let's examine the baseline transaction. A subject attempts to reach a resource. The request is intercepted by the policy enforcement point, blocking direct access. The hidden policy decision point evaluates this request and sends an allow command, opening the gateway to permit that specific connection. This gateway authorizes access exclusively for this specific session. It does not leave a persistent open door for future traffic. If that same subject requests a second separate resource, the entire process repeats. An entirely new evaluation occurs through a separate PDP and PEP pair. The PDP-PEP framework transforms network security from a static, passive wall into an active, continuous negotiation for data access. To generate its authorization decisions, the PDP utilizes a strict set of criteria known as the trust algorithm. Presenting a verified username and password is no longer enough to gain entry. The algorithm evaluates the requesting asset's observable security state. A central engine gathers multiple data streams, measuring device conditions like patch levels and behavioral attributes like usage deviations. It dynamically calculates these variables, generating a precise confidence score that either passes or fails the policy threshold. If the threshold is met, the principle of least privilege is applied. The system dictates that access is restricted strictly to the minimum permissions needed to complete the specific task. By demanding dynamic state evaluation, the architecture ensures that an attacker utilizing legitimate, stolen user credentials on an unmanaged or compromised device will fail the algorithm and be denied access to enterprise data. Maintaining this posture requires an active feedback loop, managed through a continuous diagnostics and mitigation system. Measuring an asset's health is not a one-time event that ends at login. The enterprise must constantly monitor its active systems for new vulnerabilities. If a safe device suddenly exhibits abnormal behavior, that data instantly feeds back into the algorithm. The asset's confidence score is dynamically downgraded in real time. The PEP reacts to the lowered score by instantly terminating the active session, disconnecting the device from the resource. Every access request and connection termination is logged. The enterprise processes this network traffic data to continually refine the trust algorithm and improve policy creation. Without a continuous diagnostics feedback loop actively measuring state, a zero-trust architecture decays rapidly. It reverts back into a static, vulnerable system relying on outdated assumptions of safety. When we shift our perspective from a single transaction to the macro-level operation of a fully deployed enterprise, the underlying architecture reaches its full utility. This resource-centric architecture effortlessly scales. It secures data across multi-cloud environments, localized on-premise servers, and remote satellite facilities with equal efficiency. Because the PDP and PEP establish localized microperimeters around every distinct node, they operate entirely independently of the overarching network structure. This compartmentalized approach allows an enterprise to securely accommodate contracted services and non-employee access. External partners can interact with specific necessary resources without exposing the core enterprise infrastructure to outside risk. This decentralized, isolated structure provides deep resilience, stripping away the inherent fragility of relying on a single wide area perimeter. Shifting security from the network layer to the resource layer allows the enterprise to scale its footprint across diverse environments without a proportional increase in its attack surface. Implementing this framework requires addressing a massive industry misconception. Zero Trust cannot be procured as a single off-the-shelf vendor product. NIST defines ZTA as an ongoing operational strategy of dynamic risk management and workflow planning, rather than a wholesale technology replacement. The initial transition steps are methodological. Organizations must identify every enterprise actor, map all owned assets, and formulate highly granular access policies. True enterprise resilience requires abandoning the illusion of a safe internal network. We must instead demand rigorous, continuous, state-based proof for every